Hey everyone, and welcome to Maybe Muslim. I'm Mariam Haider, producer and host of the podcast. And in this episode, I am in conversation with Nadira Khatun, Associate Professor at the School of Communications, XIM University, Bhubaneswar, Odisha, and the author of the book Post-Colonial Bollywood and Muslim Identity, Production, Representation, and Reception. Through this book, Nadira traces the representation of Muslim characters within Hindi cinema in post partition India and how the socio political and economic factors have contributed to various representations across decades. We discussed the influence of Bollywood on our own personal upbringings, how cinematic representations contributed to the majoritarian perception of the Muslim identity and its interactions with us. From films like Mughal-e-Azam and Mammo to Gully Boy and Superboys of Malegaon, Nadira and I talk about the evolution of Muslim characters and what it would take to make a movie with a truly effortless Muslim representation that does not fulfill any expectation or stereotype. We also discussed the many failings of Hindi filmmakers in representing Muslim women, who were either exoticized or shown as oppressed, leaving us with the hope that there is a whole world to cover when it comes to exciting possibilities in the space of truly Bebak representations. This was an exciting conversation, one that I hope will make many of you pick up Nadira's book and discuss it further within your circles. Hey Nadira, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's such a pleasure to see you, and I had been waiting to speak to you for a while now. And welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me at your podcast and inviting me. And it's a pleasure joining here.
I came across your book very recently, Post-Colonial Bollywood and Muslim Identity, Production, Representation, and Reception. And when I learned of your book, the first thing that came to me was like, oh my God, I have been waiting for a book like this for such a long time. Because I remember speaking to my friends about it, talking about how we've grown up around this sense of having Muslim characters in Hindi cinema, in Bollywood. I mean, we've grown up around the big Khans, and their presence in our lives. Like, I think we all have a special kind of heart, different heart for Shah Rukh Khan, like, I think we all grew up in that India. And I have always been like wondering that, where is this sort of all this material that we have grown up around exploring this identity through cinema. Like, somebody must be doing some curation of it, somebody must be doing some research on it. So when your book came out, I the first thought was like, thank God. And then I really was like, okay, I need to get a hold of this book and read it. So I think the first question I really have for you is, how did you come about writing this book, and how has this journey been for you so far?
Uh, when I started working for my PhD in 2010, at that time, I just finished my MPhil, and my MPhil was on again online activism and through online platform, how activism can happen. So on primarily on digital activism, but definitely that topic was also interesting. But later when I started doing my PhD, I thought of changing it and make it more to choose a topic something more passionate to me, and I am or which is more personal to me, I can say that. So when and from childhood, as I have grown up in West Bengal, and it's not a metro city where I have grown up. It's rural part of West Bengal, and we can call it, at that time it was kind of sort of village, but now it is a very like semi-urban kind of space. But at that time, the only exposure to the world I had, that was cinema. And from that early childhood, I was too much passionate about watching films. And at that time, we had only Doordarshan and DD1 and DD2. And we didn't have any other, like today's age, thousands of channels and thousands of options. Every Saturday during lunch, like post lunch, DD1 or DD2 had one film which they used to screen. So I and my school was like half school, like until 12:30 my school used to be on Saturdays. I used to wait throughout the week for that Saturday afternoon that I will watch a film. And I'm fortunate in that sense. My parents never stopped me there that no, you can't watch a film. So that was my relationship with film, because I enjoyed watching films throughout my childhood. Though I will not say that I had great option that curated films and I was exposed to world cinema at that moment, but definitely Bengali film, actually Satyajit Ray, Tapan Sinha, Mrinal Sen, and those films also, they had a kind of mark which was, again, can be considered that audio films and were at part to world cinema. So that was my fascination to film. At the same time, when I was growing up, as you have rightly pointed out, that three Khans and the kind of they were emerging and in 90s. So though the Khans were the biggest stars of that particular time, but though my family surname is Khan, but I have seen a kind of marginalization at my space and in my household space. So, for example, if someone is coming, my mom is reluctant to offer food, whether the person will eat or not, because of the religious biases and the kind of some kind of uh, superstition that they eat beef, so we can't have food in their home. And we used our house was located in a Hindu dominated area, so majority of my friends were Hindus, and I used to get clothes and dresses during Durga Puja than Eid, because of course, you when you have friends there getting Durga Puja, like 3 4 dresses in Durga Puja, and there is not a single friend who is Muslim and who is getting new clothes in Eid. So definitely, your parents also are kind of, they have a sense of belongingness and association with the larger community where we belong to. So they might have thought that, yeah, her friends are getting clothes, and see, if she is not getting, then she might feel bad. So therefore, the kind of rituals we had, we used to get new clothes in Durga Puja than. But though we had that kind of larger association and belongingness to other communities, but at the same time, I have seen a subtle marginalization. For example, when we shifted to our new home, and there was one group of people, they came and they had some kind of meeting with my father and parent that there is a pond in front of my house, so you can't throw bones and big bones, and they assume that that is beef bones, though there is no as such discussion on the food, and they never have seen that we are eating beef, but that kind of meeting, it just happened. So I that those but I think our generation, we have the courage to raise the voice, probably more we can say, and we have the platform. But our parents generation, probably they might not had the platform, and they were more prone to compromise with their own identity. I find they are more tolerant, they were more tolerant. So they I have seen they have always adjusted with these situations. That a kind of identity crisis I always had, and that uh, I have inculcated from my childhood. And at a point of time, I used to think that probably if I reveal my own identity, people will not speak to me the way they are speaking to me so nicely. For example, when I used to go to college, and in public transport, there are a lot of people you are meeting in bus or in train or some in other public transport. They used to ask my name, but they very nicely, we are talking, and they used to ask my name, and I used to tell my nickname, that is Ruby, because I used to think that if I tell my own original name, then the person might not be talking to me that nicely once they get to know my own identity or my religious identity. So that actually had a kind of identity crisis already in within me. So definitely when I started doing my PhD at that time, I thought to mix these two and if I can work on this, because whenever I have seen any kind of Bollywood Muslim representation, I always found out that they are either exoticized or they are probably the villain or they are the enemy of the nation. So there is not a regular ordinary guy who is doing 9 to 5 job. So but my relative and my family, I have always seen that they are any other ordinary regular guy and who and as my neighbors. So that's how I came up with this topic and I thought of exploring further. And when I started doing PhD in 2010, there were very few works have been done on Muslim representation. At that time, only I had the book, I had the access of Ira Husker's and Richard Allen's book, Islamic Culture.
Right.
And there was one more article which was published by, initially it was published by one journalist, and later getting inspired by that particular piece of journalistic piece, Maidul Islam has published another research article. So only these two articles and these two options were there. There is not a single other research paper or book which were available. But what Richard Allen and Ira Vasquez's book, actually it was not talking about or critically looking at the politics of representation. Rather, they were just deconstructing. They have deconstructed the representation of Muslims in Bollywood cinema. So, therefore, I found out that this area might be a fascinating area to explore further. That's how I have come up with this topic.
Oh, absolutely. I think everything that you were saying was resonating, and I remember you write this, line that right from the early history of Indian cinema, Bombay films have always aligned their political ideology with the state's political ideology of the time. And I think that encapsulates what you were just saying, that this body of work that you've created allows for anyone to look at the span of post-colonial India, post-partition India, and really sit with all the movies that they have watched. Maybe they watched more, like some of them might have watched movies like Garam Hawa and Mughal-e-Azam, to they watching Padmavat or Baji Rao Mastani. I think that just the scope of work, like in your book, um, gives such a remarkable insight into this representation, into like how the politics and the culture and the social and the economics, all of that influences the way representation comes about, and how much does that help us see the way that the perception of Muslims has been, and I kind of want to open this towards how you created the genres within the book, how you classify the Muslim representation, and through that maybe we can dive deeper into some of the other aspects.
Yeah, sure. This actually, Muslims in post-colonial Bollywood production, representation, and reception. In this particular book, I have primarily looked at a comprehensive understanding of Muslims in post-colonial Bollywood, that is of 1947 to 2020. So it's a span of almost 75 years. And I have in this book, I have, as I was speaking about, I did not only deconstruct the nuances of Muslim representation, rather I have also analyzed the politics of those representations. So that was very important, I thought, because I was not getting any as such academic work where they have talked about the politics of those representations, why that kind of representation happened. So because on the other hand, if we look at Muslims are always represented through a kind of ideological a selective ideological lens. So therefore that was very much needed, or the kind this work was very much needed. If I talk about the structure, first I tried to identify that what kind of representations happened in terms of Muslim representation. So I have categorized this representation into four different genre, and surprisingly, while categorizing this representation, I saw also a kind of a particular era is attached to each genre. Primarily, though I'm telling that era is attached, or era we can tag with this genre, but those eras are not a kind of airtight or watertight demarcation, but we can, because as you have rightly pointed out, even it is there in my book, that film industry in India has always worked as state apparatus, because state ideology is very much aligned with the film ideologies. So therefore, as we have seen, gradually the state ideology got changed over the period of time. Even film representation also started getting changed over the period of time. So, if I talk about these four genre, the first is Muslim historical, and in that particular genre, I have tried to understand that Muslims in Muslim historical and Muslims in historical genre, how from diplomat warrior, for example, films like Mughal-e-Azam or Shah Jahan, Noor Jahan, and those like grand narratives and grand representation of Muslims, Mughal rulers, to barbarian outsiders, Muslims in historical genre. This is a recent development in the recent time. So where we are looking at the in historical film, the way earlier historical films used to be there. Primarily, we have seen the Mughal rulers and the glorification of those Mughal rulers. But now we are seeing that historical films, and again, Muslims are there, but they are the enemy and they are the outsiders and they are the invaders, like Khilji or Aurangzeb, and the kind of tyranny in their regime. That's what we are primarily seeing in this particular genre, and in that particular chapter. Then the next chapter I have talked about, that is Muslim social, and there I have looked at initially Muslim social, for example, film like Pakiza, Umrauzan, and those. From there to later age, we are seeing the latest film of Muslim social, that is probably De Riskia or Salim Langre Pe Matro. So I have named this particular chapter as exotic exclusive to ordinary inclusive, because they initially they were too much exoticism was there. Now we are seeing that ordinary Muslim characters and their everyday struggle. For example, Salim Langre Mein Matro, that's a film, or Mammo, that's a film where we are looking at certain issues or social issues which are attached to the film. Uh, then we are in the next chapter. What I have named it as the Muslim political genre, and this is one of the most important chapter in my book, where I have looked at. Primarily, this genre belongs to 1970s onwards, and there are certain subtopics I would like to point out here in this genre I have discussed. That is, in this particular time, 1990s onwards, because there was countries socio-politics also was getting changed, because 1990s, late 1990, in 1980s onwards, we have seen aggressive right-wing ideologies started emerging, and that had actually influenced Muslim identity or representation of Muslims or Bollywood cinema overall. And therefore, we are seeing that a kind of a good number of films we started emerging during 1990s. All Karan Johar films, for example, Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum, Hum Saath Saath Hai, all those like joint family, Hindu culture, and that those films I have categorized, or I have themed as ideal image of an Indian family and Hinduized nation. So this particular I have critically looked at, or I have argued in this particular section, that if you are portraying one particular religion as one particular religion, particularly Hindu religion, as Indian culture or Indian religion, then you are actually marginalizing automatically other cultures and other religion as the other. So that is what the argument was for in this particular section. And then the next section I have talked about, during this particular period also we have seen that gangster all the underworld dawn, those films started coming in. So as underworld dawn, and there is a reason for this particular mafias and Muslim gangsters. First of all, it's not that where um, just like that they are represented. Again, underworld dawn themselves, they have funded these films, many of those films, because they wanted to showcase their, or wanted to whitewash their image, that they are, though they are underworld dawn, but they are doing something good for the society, and they are the benevolent underworld, they're benevolent dawn, they are the Robin Hood figure. So that's how they came up with this kind of Bollywood has came up with this kind of films. But also because of these films, or there is we are automatically tagging a particular community that they are involved in crime, right? So without talking about the politics, because of course I have pointed out in my book also, if you look at crime rate in Bombay, Professor Shaban Abdul Shaban has done one beautiful study, and he has looked at the crime rate. If you look at among Muslim youth, the crime rate, it was more. But and also you are enforcing through these films that Muslims are involved in underworld, these gangster wars and all. So automatically you are tagging one community that they are always involved in this mawali and this mafia war and all. But you are ignoring the politics of it. That even in that book, Shaban has pointed out that unemployment rate and education, lack of education, unemployment rate, and also there are a lot of cases because of the identity. Muslims are denied of loans, so they can't start with their own something, startup or business or whatever it is. So there are multiple levels of marginalization because of that. But films are, of course, they are not talking about all these nuances and politics. So you are automatically tagging one particular community as they're the mafia and the gangsters and underworld on. Then the next category I have talked about, that is one of the, and it is still fascinating among audience, that is nationalism, communal conflicts, terrorism and geopolitics. So during this particular time also we have seen a kind of surge in representing Muslims as terrorists. And there are a lot of nationalistic films, they started emerging during this particular time. Also we have seen in reality there are a good number of terroristic attacks which started happening and took place during this particular period. It all started with Roja the film. And Roja was all about the Kashmir and the terrorist attacks in Kashmir and Kashmiri terrorism. But that became the floodgate. And after that, after 1992, the riot happened in Bombay and across the country. And based after that, the blast conducted by again underworld Mumbai underworld dons, and that actually influenced or inspired many filmmakers to make films on terroristic attacks in India. And later on 9/11 happened, and we got global terrorism, the topic global terrorism, and based on that also we have seen certain films. So there are three categories of terroristic films that are made in Bollywood cinema. And the last, of course, that is most favorite, again became favorite in 1990s, that is Pakistan as an enemy. But there is no harm in pointing out Pakistan as an enemy. Yeah, Pakistan is actually a lot of scenes and lot of war we had between Pakistan and India. But there are certain films which actually interchangeably they used Pakistanis and Muslims, because Pakistani and Muslim, they became interchangeable word. That became a problem. So that is one area I thought of talking in this particular section. And the last section, that is, but here, if I write today, I would have added one more section in Muslim political. That is very important. Again, because of all these files, Kashmir files, Bengal files, because filmmakers are very much interested these days, I think, or there are certain filmmakers to make films on files. So now, in these films, if you look at, filmmakers are not anymore telling that Pakistan is an enemy. Rather, your internal people and within community people are your enemy. For example, if you talk about Kashmir files, Bengal files, Kerala story, where you are not tagging a Pakistani that you are doing harm to our nation or our community. Rather, you are telling your own people that you are doing certain harm to um, our community here, us versus them. Again, them earlier it was they were outsider. Now them has become like insider has become them. So that is one very dangerous trait what I'm seeing in recent, very recent films. And the last chapter, I have talked about the Muslim modern genre. That is, again, the after 2005, we have, on the one hand, we are seeing a kind of enemy within, but at the same time, we are seeing different, more liberated Muslim representation. For though I'm not really great hopeful that they are changing everything, but at least certain films like um, Jindagi Milegi Nahi Dobara, where a character is introduced and who is Muslim and who is not wearing his religion on his sleeves. So that is a refreshing way of looking at. Again, though I always tell that Gulliver, it's a very problematic film where it comes to the parents' representation or the father's representation, Murad's father. But at least Murad's character or Alia Bhatt's character is more. I find it's a it a it's very fresh. It's not something where Alia Bhatt is not shedding her religion to tell that no, I
Yeah.
am adopting modernity to and that's why I have adopted westernization and I am telling my stories. So she doesn't need to shade her religious identity to talk about her stories. So that is really refreshing. So that kind of films which came up in during this particular period, but at the same time, also we have seen film like Burqa under, Lipstick Under My Burqa. So it's a very kind of Brahminical gaze I find this film has adopted, though it tried to portray that no, it's a we are talking about women subjugation, oppression and all, but at the same time, it's very the gaze is very top down, rather than being inside the community and talking about women oppression. So that's what a nutshell about the book and the genre and the chapters.
Thank you so much, Nadira, for encapsulating your book so wonderfully. And I think I want to pick up from the character and the portrayal of Muslim women in modern times, because I think that is also very interesting to see as to like who is making the film, who is writing the story and the character. And like you said, like Alia Bhatt's character in Gully Boy was personally for me as well. I think if I just look back and be like, okay, one character that comes off that I want to say is an unapologetic Muslim woman, I think that was to a certain extent written really well, that she is a visibly Muslim woman and she is being very comfortable in, being also very unapologetic. She can say what she wants to say. She wants to build her life, with career, with the person that she loves, and it's all in, kind of unfolding in that backdrop of what's happening in the story. However, I think that's still like one character that comes up, and there are so many other Muslim women representations where you're kind of disappointed. Like personally, I'm just like, wait, hang on a minute. Like you took one part of, say, polygamy, or you took like triple talaq, or you took some issue which has already been like a thorn in the understanding of the Muslim identity, and you kind of zoom in on that. These filmmakers zoom in on that and they make a story out of it, which is sad, and personally like a disservice I feel to the entire sort of diversity that comes with being an Indian Muslim woman, growing up in different parts of the country, and having this medley of languages and cultures, creating who you become. You come from West
Yeah.
Bengal, and the way you have grown up and experienced your identity is very different from the way I have, and we come largely from the same Indian Muslim background. So that is something which I feel perhaps Hindi cinema has failed to capture and has failed to actually deliver. So I wanted to kind of hear from you. What was your journey like as you were researching on all these characters and really studying them, and then sitting with all of that, and imagining what could a great representation, or a well representation of a Muslim woman would be like.
Yeah, you have rightly pointed out this, but before going into women representation, before that, I would like to talk um, about representation itself, Muslim representation itself. If you look at through all this genre, there is a very all are talking about or saying a very homogenized representation of Muslims. So
Right.
that is very North Indian and upper caste is upper class. Though caste is not part of Muslim religion, but again, there are certain parts of India they experience again caste-based marginalization as well. So so upper class and North Indian, again we have hardly seen any South Indian Muslim representation in ever in any of these films, right?
Yeah.
So it's a long way to go when we talk about Muslim women representation, because the way society function, it's more of a like first, it's always we are looking at from a man's perspective or lens. Any film, that's how films are made. So still we have not gone to a position where we can experience the diversity of India and Indian culture uh, through Muslim characters. Uh, and later after that we will think about the diversity of Muslim women. That is
That's not a
too
book.
aspirational. That is too aspirational, I find, at this moment. Yeah, I think that so far we have seen it. If we talk about Muslim women representation, it's not that they are not represented, but earlier they were only the wives, and now they're probably they're the victim of systematic oppression and patriarchy, and mostly because of their religion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, either they're victim of polygamy, or they're victim of triple talaq, or their husbands are abuser. Even Darling, that's a wonderful film. But again,
Yeah.
what you are telling that they're too masculine, and that's why they're too patriarchal, and therefore you
Mm.
are subjugating and you are so oppressive. So therefore, only through these selective lens, Muslim women are represented so far, and um, I am not any like I'm not hoping that soon it is going to change. So yeah.
I grew up with, like you were saying, like grew up with certain films where I consciously wasn't necessarily, watching them, but there was a sense of like belonging that I felt. I think I remember watching Mammo when I was very young, and more than the fact that it was such a tender film about this relationship between a grandparent and a pre-adolescent child. I was curious. I think I felt more curiosity about how comfortable it was for me to like see like how the home was and like the conversations that these women used to have and the conversations around food. They were so familiar in some ways that I realized, oh, it's so nice to actually see a sense of like real representation, a very normal day imagining of what would comprise a Muslim life, to be shown on screen. Because I think if I really have to dig deep, I don't know if there are enough movies even which had like say Muslim women, like you say, you've mentioned Umrao Jan in your book, and you've talked about the courtesan and like their representation. I think even when I watched, like my family, my grandparents, I think were very excited. Like my grandmother used to love watching Pakiza. I could never enjoy the film. I felt like as a child it was just too much of I think drama, or very sad tones to it. So as a kid I never enjoyed the film, but I do know that my grandmother would be like fascinated by it. And I think the Urdu and the vocalization of those dialogues was just so because, and again, because I come from North India, so there was this North Indian Urdu, sort of hegemonic sense of pride, almost a sense of pride that's there.
Yeah.
Even in Umrao Jan, that Lucknowi, I think there were relatives of mine who would say, "Oh, this part of Lucknow we are familiar with," and so there's always this sense of like, "Oh, there's something that we can relate to." But in a true, real sense of like what a Muslim life could be, I think there might be like just snaps or snippets of certain films where I feel like, oh yeah, like I can relate to this, like even Kabhi Khushi Kabhi Gum, like in the entire Chandni Chowk, like the I never understood how that culture is. I think for me it was very like funny. Like I think I always felt it like, oh, this was funny, like the way they are like using Urdu words. And um again, like snatches of films I can feel like, oh yeah, it's funny to like talk about it and you can laugh about it, but never truly comprehending what a simple, a normal day in a Muslim movement's or person's life looks like, in India. So when you say like it's aspirational to think about even Muslim women representation, I think I understand where you're coming from. I personally think that we are very far away from achieving that. But I am curious to like ask you, or perhaps even sit with this question of, while it might be aspirational, what do you think would it really take for that kind of cinema to be made? I mean, I personally think it's like writing, like the nuance should come out through the writing of that character and the storytelling. But what do you think? Like, what would would take to make a film or a character like that come on screen?
It's wonderful if we can have, but we have to also understand that film industry is dictated by profit making mechanism. So it's not that something which we are filmmakers, they're only aiming for uh, good content. Rather they are also trying to survive, right? And before going into Muslim women representation, again, in the majoritarian country, we are hardly seeing women centric film in general. So last mainstream larger landscape film, or the big landscape film that we have seen, that is Jigra and Alia Bhatt. If you look at this film, is no different than any other male dominated Bollywood film like Animal. Right, here also Animal, where Ranbir Kapoor is doing a kind of action and he's involved in a lot of violence. Even in Jigra also, he is trying to protect. Here in Animal, he's taking revenge, where his father is probably attacked or murdered or whatever the plot is. So he's trying to take revenge on that. And here in Jigra, Alia Bhatt is trying to save her brother. So there also the hero is involved in a lot of violence, and he or she is also involved in a lot of violence to protect family members. But Jigra was not even did moderate business, but Animal has become one of the biggest um, super hit of all time. So we have to understand that who are the takers of these films. So, do we have any taker where if forget about Muslim women, if at all we are uh, putting women at the center of that film? So, as we have not reached to that particular stage. So, it is far fetched that we expect that Muslim women and the more nuanced story would be doing great business. Uh, and that's why I told earlier, it is more of a, it's not that we don't have writer, or there is no not people are not writing great stories. There are, but ultimately it's a vulnerable industry, and a lot of money is involved in making a film. So even Sajja Iqbal's last film, that Dhadak 2, if
Hmm.
you look at, they have spent, if I'm not wrong, they have spent around 60 crore, around 60 crore to make the film. And that film has not even earned 30 crore. So such a
Hmm.
huge loss. But that film is talking about very important issue, caste-based violence. But who have taken and who are coming to watch that film? So if Sajia uh, Iqbal is making two more or one more film like that flop, is there any funder who is going to fund her film? So that is also, we have to understand that if you are making multiple flops, we will not be getting any funder or producer to fund our film. So ultimately, no, you can't, you will be dismissed and you can't make any further film. So therefore, unless and until we have a very educated film viewers and literate film viewers, that then only we can make films. Otherwise, the films will be made only for film festivals, and they will aim only film festivals. If you are going and making Dhadak 2 and it's not making good business, and then you are liable to do make a good business because you are dealing with a 60 crore budget, right? So you are forced, you are compelled to. And I find the kind of mainstream cinema, the kind of impact it has on audience, film festival films are not, can ever do that kind of impact at societal level. So therefore, we can have definitely, but again, is there any taker? So that is my main concern. How many people will go and watch those films, even in a
Yeah.
where we are actually, if you look at which are those films we are which are doing great business, RRR, Kantara, even Kantara chapter has done great, it's doing fabulous. And again, Animal, Bahubali, and Jawan, Pathan. If you look at the core characteristics of these films, all are grand in terms of visual grandeur is there, as well as the cinematography and lighting, and wonderfully, and editing and VFX wonderfully executed. And the theme, if you look at, violence is involved in all these films. That is the core theme of all these films. um, like if you look at 1970s, during that time also, Angry Young Man, Amitabh Bachchan, the films he has come up with, where also we have seen violence. And I argue that if violent films are doing great business, that means there is some kind of a problem at that particular time. It's happening in the socio-political level, because people can't perform that kind of violence in their real life. So that's why it's a kind of cathartic position where you are just trying to relate with the character, and you are telling that, okay, I can't do, you are doing, I am enjoying watching you. So that's why 70s also, during emergency and the crisis, socio-political crisis, at that moment those films worked. Even now, which the films which are working, those are also involved in violence. I think something which is uh, can you imagine any kind of romantic film will work like Hum Dil De Chuke Sanam or Hum Aapke Hai Kaun, those films will never work now because people are not having that kind of. First of all, the entire media landscape got changed at this moment. People are not having that kind of patience like in 90s, where you are watching scrolling throughout the day and you 30 seconds reel, and your concentration level um, just destroyed, and it's gone. And if you are watching a 2.5 hours film, then you don't have that much of patience to just sit and slow paced film, romantic film. So you want some thrill in, if you want to sit down throughout 2.5 hours, then that's the because of the media landscape, and also because of the sociopolitics at this moment. People are actually restless. People don't know something, they want some kind of adrenaline rush throughout. So yeah, that's why the takers are not there, and good storytelling, it is only happening through film festival films, not through mainstream films. Yeah, that is unfortunate, I understand.
I think it's also, I mean, there's one, so that's one argument that, cinema is also supposed to be like an escape of some kind, that you kind of leave everything behind and go and just spend money on feeling more, alive or like having a great time. So you're not trying to like think. And I think that's where a lot of like comedy and like a comic relief comes into picture, that cinema is created for that kind of relief. And so we see films which might just not have any narrative but just comedy taking us through the whole experience. So I understand that, and I do feel that that value of what you just said about the takers are not there. um, at the same time, like you've also mentioned in the book, that cinema has a huge role to play, in the way that the people are like, people understand society and their stories through cinema. And so representation becomes this very important and potentially a very critical aspect of who understand, so that when people watch films, they just don't go by the stereotypes, they don't go by the minority character, perfect victim, or the perfect storyteller sort of understanding of a character. And this is where I feel like it Hindi cinema particularly has failed in creating that landscape of Muslim characters, where you can have a Muslim character that can be many things, that kind of unpeels the layers of the many experiences that that person might have. And I think one of the finest pieces of writing I have come across on this is by Zishan Akhtar, who's talked about the Muslim body and what it would take for a Muslim body representation, where the layers and the embodied state of being in a country like India can be represented. And I think he made a brilliant comparison to Sinners, um, the Hollywood film, where the black body is so again unapologetic and can kind of be in the complete like shine out. Doesn't need any crutch to be accepted and to put itself out there. So maybe we are many years away from having that kind of a movie on the Hindi screens. And hopefully we will have a world of takers where such movies can do really well. But I do want to kind of also go back to when you were talking about Shazia Iqbal. So she's one director whose first movie, Bebak, was about a Muslim woman who is kind of grappling with building her career but needing funding, and then going to this Islamic institution to get funds, and how she has to navigate her experience of being expected to perform her religiosity and expected to perform her Muslimness in order to get the kind of support she needs to build her career. And I think that movie was quite powerful as well. Again, but it's a movie that I think only selective people might have watched. People who are interested in the Muslim woman or the Muslim representation. I do want to kind of ask you, like, we otherwise we have politically conscious actors. Some of them are Muslim in the Hindi cinema. Um, and what do you think? do you think that their voices and the way that they choose to pick up certain roles and talk about Hindi cinema, that also has an impact in the way that the takers, or largely like the audiences, can understand what they are missing out on when it comes to minority characters or marginalized stories? Actually, I'd rather say that.
I will continue with my last response, what I pointed out. Mm, it's not only about actors. Yeah, it's great to see that at least politically conscious actors are there and who are raising certain voices and pointing out on certain issues. But at the same time, for example, Jishan Ahmed, Jishan's voice, it doesn't matter. So he's writing. It's like any other you and I, we are writing on Muslim issues. But ultimately, does he have any kind of voice, or he can influence filmmaking? I don't think so. That position he holds on to, because for that you need to have again. You need to have that materialistic position or holdings, right? For example, if Shah Rukh Khan is coming up and saying something, it the kind of impact it will have. On the other hand, Zishan is pointing out something. Because again, it's not only because of the Shah Rukh Khan and the kind of funding he can do for his films, but of course he is now global icon, and because of that. But on the other hand, also because if he's putting across his position, it doesn't make any sense unless and until he can fund his film, right? So I don't find that will have great impact uh, on entire filmmaking or Muslim representation. I really don't think so.
I kind of want to zoom out and also talk about your. I remember one of your interviews where somebody mentioned this to you, that it's important also that a Muslim writing about Muslim representation in Hindi cinema has its own value. And while I was listening to that question, what occurred to me was like, actually, a Muslim woman writing about Muslim representation in Hindi cinema has more value, because personally for me, looking at Muslim women representation, I think has had an impact on me. It has influenced me in the way I understood how I was perceived in the eyes of my fellows, classmates, peers, you know. And
Yeah.
I want to ask you this question, like, as had did your own experience of growing up, and experiencing and navigating your identity also had like, how much did the Muslim woman, or the identity that you carry as a Muslim woman, help you understand and write about Muslim women characters in films?
I think it's not Muslim women particularly. I would like to point out, because again, when we are critically looking at representation of Muslim women, it's not that many representations we have, right? That we critically look at, because whatever we are watching on screen, it's all about, like, we always disassociate with those representations mostly. So we can't relate to. So therefore, I think more than Muslim women, just as Muslim person, I find that is more I relate to. Because see, it's not that I was uh, uh, never I was a victim of patriarchy in my family. I was in, like any other family. Majority of the Indian families, irrespective of any religion, they are a victim of a systematic patriarchal setup what we belong to, and that is there. But that I don't look at being a Muslim girl. Rather, I find that is a societal problem. As in the film Bebak, there is one beautiful dialogue that everyone, in every religion patriarchy is there, only we are the one who are targeted. So that is there. But apart from that, I when I am seeing that in Darlings, for example, again a kind of patriarchal setup, it's there, and the torture she's going through because of her gender position. I don't relate that to religion because that's a societal problem, I find. But when I'm seeing nikah and triple talaq, I can't relate to it. I have not seen even distant of my relative. They had this kind of talak, and of course there are divorces, but there are divorces like any other divorces, like legal way of doing it. But the it's not that people are telling three times talak and then it's happening, that drama I never heard in my entire. So therefore I disassociate with this particular entire situation. I can't relate to even the whole idea of talak. I got to know from film that I never knew about it because never discussed in my family, in my extended family also.
Yeah, yeah.
So therefore there are two extremes, which is one which is I really can't relate to. The other one, I am seeing those problems as it's a societal problem. It's not only associated to, again, one particular religion. Yeah.
I think I agree with you on that similar experience where, um, like I said, like it was perhaps even like Alia Bhatt's character in Gully Boy was more of like, I like that she's so, Bebak in her own way. But I don't know if I can relate to everything. And I think the idea of having an un like an like one of my imaginations of a character would be like a very like unambitious person who's not trying to be good, neither has any interest in doing anything, and can just chill and happen to be like a Muslim character. Like I would love to have that where I'm not performing a role, like where the character is not performing a certain role or a pre meet like a pre thought of like, okay, oh, this has to be the nice Muslim, or this has to be like a Muslim that again, or like all that the Muslim happens to be a Pakistani terrorist, or something along those lines. So I'm like, can this just be like nothing?
Yeah.
Like doesn't have to like do much, but just chill because yeah, Muslims also do that. So I think that's one of my hopes and imaginations for a character. While you were speaking about these movies, I was also thinking about Superboys of Malegaon.
Yes.
When I watched it, I think my first response to that film was like, it was, to me personally, it was something I was like, oh, it's an all Muslim cast. Like the cast, like literally, like I'm hearing all these names, and I'm not familiar with Malegaon, and I'm not familiar with that sort of their reality. But the fact that a movie was made which doesn't necessarily have Muslims as sidekicks or like supporting roles, but it's an all Muslim cast, was refreshing to me, And so I liked that, and it didn't try to prove anything. It didn't try to harp on that, but it just was itself. That all of them are Muslims, and they come from a part of town which is, again, actually, it's not, I believe, if I remember correctly, that the town is divided as well. Like there is this sort of a Muslim inhabited area, and then the other religions, or rather like the majoritarian, I'm not familiar, but that part of the town is what the movie focused on. And yeah, I think, I mean, it's not a question, I'm just sitting with it, that it was based on Faiza Khan's documentary, right? So I just look at it from that perspective, that the importance of looking at the ground realities and then creating sort of cinema out of it. I know there are always going to be like flaws, and I think there's always going to be like um, sanitizations. You will sanitize a lot of things when you make a movie like that. But I still, I don't know, that movie, it something was right about it. Like I liked it in the ways that I was like, oh, okay, you know, let's watch this. Like you don't necessarily need to think more than that.
I think it is not proclaiming that they are the Muslim characters. They happen to be Muslim characters. So
Exactly.
the issue is not around Muslims and their issues. The
Yeah,
plot, that's what we can, it should come out more, the films should come out more on that, that the character can have the name Khan or Ahmed or something, but they are probably tackling or dealing with probably other issues, everyday issues. They are trying to make a film, right? Probably they are having office politics, or they are trying to cope up with some other environmental issues. So
exactly.
they don't need to always tackle with talak, terrorism, or or outsider. So that's what we expect more, so that religion is not tagged with their name and religious identity is not tagged with their name. They happen to be Muslims, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, thank you for saying that, because I think that was precisely the emotion that, yeah, I mean, they just happen to be Muslims, and but the real problem is that they want to make a film,
exactly.
you know, and they're gonna make a film in with whatever they have, and that to me was quite important, and I think I valued that, and I feel personally that if more and more, like, this idea of like being comfortable with your Muslim identity comes off through representation, when I'm speaking to you, so I will talk films, but whether it's literature or whether it's theater or pop culture, whichever way, it just kind of takes away that baggage, that is constantly imposed, that we have to perform, and because there is the historical othering, and that Islamophobia, and that um, that sense of not belonging has become so. I think, like, when we were speaking earlier, you mentioned about how that othering that you grew up with, like, you internalize that, and I wish if there is a way that internalizing can just get lesser and lesser, that we no longer have to internalize that othering. We can be unapologetic, we can be comfortable in our imperfections and confusions, and speak it out, and not worry that I have to constantly be on guard of how I'm perceived. And I mean, again, your work has done an incredible job of putting it all out there, of really, really speaking to so many of us and telling us that this kind of othering and this kind of experience does leave an impact. I think you've used that to fuel your work, and I think more and more of us just benefit from that. So I just want to kind of, maybe end on an optimistic note and ask you if, what do you think? What do you hope your book can bring for people, like the change, the way they look at cinema, the way the takers. Actually, I would like to talk about the takers, like you were saying. Like, I wish more and more people read your book, and what do you hope from them to ask from filmmakers? Where do they want to put their money in?
That's
Sorry, that's a hard question, maybe.
before going into that question, I would like to point out one more article just submitted, and it would be out soon, hopefully. That where I have looked at how history is getting rewritten by Bollywood, and there are certain films, mythological films, they are posed in such a way that they are history. For example, Ram Setu and Adi Purush, these films, though they are mythological texts, but somewhere those films are coming across that they are historical texts. So on that is again a kind of rewriting entire history and the traditional history. So that is a kind of again new thing if you look at the politics of representation in Bollywood. and where we are certain things are engineered and orchestrated, certain political narratives are propagated um, through fictional text, then it is, again I would like to point out, it's good if I can think that, or if I positively taking it that filmmakers, they are reading my book and they are trying to uh, make characters or create characters, like as rightly you have pointed out, Muslims characters can be just through their names only, we are just getting to know, not through their um, issues and the way they are dealing with their religion or performing their religion. It's they, because they're at this moment their identity is reduced to only religious identity, or we are not focusing on other, um, one person is not only carrying the religious identity, rather any one of us, we hold multiple identities. So filmmakers, they are only dealing, when it comes to Muslims, only they are dealing with their religious identity. I hope they deal with the larger and different types of identities of Muslims, not only their religious identity. So that is, again I would like to point out, probably would not like to listen to aspirational, but again, unless and until our social fabric is changing, our politics of the country is changing, things are going to change soon. So, but at the same time we have to also understand that uh, Pathan is it's a political film, I find, though it's mainstream film, but it's a political film because the kind of political rhetoric the film talks about. But ultimately this film has become one of the biggest success, right? So but again we have to understand that who is the lead character in Pathan? He's representing majoritarian community. But if he would have been some Ahmed or Khan or Sheikh, then I really doubt that how many people would have gone and watched that film. So um, yeah.
Are you talking about Pathan or is it Jawan that you're talking about?
Oh, sorry, Jawan, not
Yeah,
Pathan.
yeah, yeah.
Pathan, again,
Yeah.
it's following the same trope of Pakistan. Sorry,
Mm,
it's Jawan. So,
yeah.
yeah, but it's good to, of course, we should be hopeful that we are going to get characters more of a like the side characters. Zindagi Milegi Nahi Dobara, if I'm not wrong, the Kabir's character, Kabir was the name of that particular character or protagonist. So those characters will not be the side character anymore, they would be the central character. So that's what we can hope for. Yeah, let's hope for the best.
Yeah, let's hope for the best. And I think you were talking about, so I will take maybe 5 minutes more of your time because I want to kind of now look at the, like, talk about the Muslim historical bit, because um like we start from a movie like Mughal-e-Azam, where there is this sort of the glory, I would say, like, again, like, it's a historical sort of narrative, but we don't know about, like, the like, obviously the love story between Jahangir and Anarkali, and all of that, like, that's not, we don't have evidence of it, we don't have any proof that that love story ever happened. um, but it's a tale that kind of captures the minds and hearts of people, and has continued to capture the minds and hearts of people for decades now, like Madhubala's character and Dilip Kumar's character, and um when I look at, like, the way that the Muslim historical films have been made in the last, I don't know, 2 decades or so, I don't know if there's any movie that has had that type of remarkable impact on me. Like, even if I just purely look at it, because I don't feel excited of look watching it. I don't feel like, oh, this would be a fun sort of experience. It's interesting that, and then there is this confluence of, like, sorry, conflation of Bajirao Mastani's character, where you have a glimpse of Mastani, where who's who has these dialogues where she's talking about the syncretism, or like the reality that she might be Muslim, but she's in love with this Peshwa. Um, and I think that's a glimpse of what Muslim historical cinema could do, you know, maybe, but it's not enough because, like you said, like there are these movies which are getting made, which are distorting history.
Yeah. I think when it comes to Mughal-e-Azam and I don't romanticize those films, and I don't find those films are fascinating. Yeah, it can be to a particular segment, as you have pointed out. Even in my book, also, I have there are some people who have expressed that when they have watched those films they got fascinated, and they actually their earlier generation they really liked. And your aunt, even you have pointed out that she used to be intrigued by seeing that, okay, see the Lucknowi culture these films are representing. But again, it's when you are showcasing the entire community through that particular lens, I find
Hmm.
the the person who is repairing bicycle, he might be also carrying the same religious identity, but he doesn't have sandaliers and mahal and where he belongs to. So
Yeah, none of us.
so
Yeah.
so therefore it is good to romanticize. That means you are ignoring the reality through
Mhm.
selective lens. When you are putting entire community only one, or through a particular lens, that means you are ignoring their everyday struggle, their everyday realities, and you are conveniently choosing to something and resorting to something. Ultimately, I find that's why I don't find those representations really fascinating, and I never romanticize those because,
I personally felt like, though, I mean, for me, those representations I think have been more like I don't know if I ever saw them from a Muslim lens.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Like Umrao Jan is like, okay, like again, like for me, they were always like very novelty ideas that were getting, captured and represented on screen. Um, but it's the movie like I said, Mammo, which made me feel very, oh yeah, like this is what a Muslim life could be, and I can associate with it. So yeah, like I think you're right. I do agree with you on that note that there is no reality connection there. They're
Yeah.
meant, like, at least the way I have pictured them, like they're like imaginations or like interpretations of something that was there, was not there, we don't know. But like you said, like a man who happens to be Muslim, who just repairs bicycles, like it's so far away from his reality. And where is the kind of representation there where you could have that? And maybe I think I am remembering this from your book, that maybe it was in the in the 70s, where you had the angry young man, and you could have characters who were also angry and frustrated with the systems, and they wanted to, like, they needed a voice, and like then this Amitabh Bachchan becomes that voice.
at least at least still at that time we have seen, for example, Coolie,
Hmm.
Amitabh's character, he is actually brought up by a Muslim man, if I'm not wrong in this particular story. I watched long back, but that's why
Hmm.
786, that in his in Coolie's that plate it is there, and that
Hmm. Hmm.
that
Hmm.
number
Hmm.
is
Right.
coming multiple times because the filmmakers is associating these numbers with the character and his religious identity. I think Allah Rakha was also the vultures, or he had a bird and whose name was. So therefore, I still find in 80s and during that time, Angry Young Man still, even if you look at parallel cinema at that moment, Salim Langre Pe Matro, it is purely a Muslim character and his hardship, and at that time it's been shown. And also at that time, as Salim Javed was the writer of Kuli and Zanjeer and those films, I find at least that communal harmony and the syncretism was still glorified in to some extent.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I understand the challenges of what can cinema do. I mean, I don't want to say challenges actually. I mean, I don't know, but I do feel cinema has a big role to play in influencing masses. And so I think it's the on the onus really lies on the filmmakers and these, like you said, I mean, there are big actors perhaps maybe who can take up the mantle of this if they want to. But yeah, I think it's a long road ahead, but there are some works like yours which give me hope, and I do want to end on that hopeful note. So thank you so much, Nadira. It's been a really, really educational, interactive conversation with you. I'm very glad that you could make the time, and I look forward to everything that you're writing.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. It was fun talking to you. And I totally enjoyed. I never thought that it's a kind of podcast I'm speaking. Rather, I was feeling like I'm talking to a friend and we are just discussing about films. That's it. Thanks so much for inviting, and it was pleasure. And hopefully, we will keep in touch and we have further discussions on films.
I would love to do that. Thank you so much, Nadira. If you enjoyed listening to this episode, please share it with your family and friends, and don't forget to subscribe to mebhimuslim.com. Thank you for listening to Maybe Muslim. I'm Mariam Heather, and we'll be back with another episode in a few weeks' time. Until then, take care, lots of love and gratitude.